let's switch over for a second and move ourselves over to Moscow, where there's big doings, right? The Victory Day celebration. Talk to me about China's participation in that.
Well, Xi Jinping is there, and for Vladimir Putin, that's really important because this is the biggest non-secular holiday in Russia's year. And this year is especially important because you've got the war in Ukraine. Xi Jinping wants to show his solidarity to Russia. You know, we're seeing all of these statements. Actually, they're as they're as exaggerated as they normally are about China-Russia relations. But make no mistake about it, China and Russia are on the same page, and they're working very closely. Remember, at this point, there are Chinese military officers in the Ukraine war. They're at the front. They're nominally observers. I suspect they're also advisors. But in addition to that, there are Chinese mercenaries actually fighting for Russia in Ukraine. And they are supposedly without the stamp of approval from Beijing, but you could not have military-aged men getting visas to go to Russia, and when the regime knows exactly what's going on. So I think China is just trying this on. They're seeing the reaction of the United States and the West to the introduction of Chinese soldiers. And so it is not inconceivable, Mike, that we are going to see not only mercenaries, but we're going to see China actually fighting in Ukraine. I know that sounds a little bit inconceivable, but you know, we go back about 6 months and the idea of North Korea having, you know, right, 12, 13,000, you know, North Korean soldiers actually fighting in Ukraine. I mean, no one would have said, oh, yeah, of course that's going to happen. But it did.
Right. No, absolutely. And it caught a lot of people by surprise, despite the support that North Korea had been providing to Putin up to that stage, obviously with hardware, munitions, and and other assistance. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It would be, to use your word, inconceivable to imagine that the Russian military is out there recruiting Chinese citizens to come fight in the war as mercenaries without having had any dialogue with the Chinese government to discuss this, given that Putin is kind of the, he's the lesser character in that relationship, right? I mean, I think, but I guess, when you look at the attendance, right? Xi Jinping being there in Moscow and, talking the other day about their friendship of steel, right? And their previous no limits partnership. Is this, I mean, how can you actually describe that relationship? My impression has always been the regime is always going to do whatever's in its best interest. And it's very good at sort of strategic in the moment relationships and friendships. But they kick them to the curb, once they view it as not in their best interest. Is this a best friends forever scenario, or, is China just doing what they've done in the past in terms of Russia?
Well, it's not best friends forever, but it could be best friends for decades. And it is a relationship which is much stronger than most people thought. We had a lot of very smart people in New York and Washington say, China and Russia will never get along. Well, okay, I don't care what happens in the year 2100. I care what happens right now. And in the here and now, China is backing Russia almost to the hilt. We see this with not only the elevated commodity purchases, which finances the war, but China opened up its financial system to sanctioned Russian institutions. We got diplomatic support, propaganda support, weapons support. We have Chinese soldiers in Ukraine, some of them mercenaries, some of them there with the sanction of Beijing. This is something that's Putin's very important to Xi Jinping. And yes, he's the junior partner, but Vladimir Putin does things that China doesn't want to do itself. And so Putin is absolutely essential to Chinese foreign policy as Xi Jinping sees it. So this is a proxy war, and China is a combatant. We have got to recognize that. We have failed to recognize that, and we're not imposing costs on China for its support of that war effort. And to put this into context, we have China and Russia destabilizing North Africa, fueling insurgencies that look like wars. We have China with the same tactics supporting Iran in its assault on Israel. We now have China's support for Pakistan in what could end up being a war. So this is China destabilizing the world. And to go back to the point about trade, trade allows China to do this. So if we trade with China, what we are doing is we are fueling the destabilization of the world. We're fueling all of these wars. And if we want peace, we're going to have to make a very tough decision and say, no, we're not going to trade with China because we do not want a general war around the world. And that's where we're going, Mike. This starting to look like the beginning stages of World War III. Remember, in the 1930s, there were separate wars that merged into what we now call World War II. The same thing, I think, is happening right now with China and Russia fighting directly or indirectly around the world. So all of these regional conflicts, as we call them, they all have global significance.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and leave a comment, a really positive, nice, and kind comment. That would be appreciated. And if you're not already subscribed to our channel, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our daily updates.